Roker, co-host of the Today Show, and we want to welcome you to NBCU Academy. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Erin McGarry. She's the executive editor of the NBC News Climate Unit. We're going to talk with her about her producing career and how we all cover climate, as well as offering some tips for folks on how you should be thinking about covering climate. Erin, thanks for joining us today. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too, in person.
So, yeah, that's right. We've been working remotely. I think you've got a really interesting professional arc, and you come to this really quite honestly, in that you started off as a storm chaser, working in television.
Yeah. Well, so right. This is weather and climate that we do, and I say I'm not a meteorologist, but I worked for Peacock Productions, which was the in-house documentary unit for NBC News. And on a Tuesday, my boss came to me and said, hey, we have these two guys. They're meteorologists, they're storm chasers. We think we want to start a storm chasing show for Weather Channel. Can you go out Thursday and see if you can produce a show? So on Wednesday, I learned to bring a car with cameras. I shot at the time, and I went out, and a week later, we got 7 tornadoes. So I said, we have a show, we can do it. And the guys were meteorologists, so they were using all these terms like, look at that mesocyclone, like, look at the RFD. And I was like, what's an RFD? So I got my weather education in the car, writing the show, wrote for Weather Channel. So meteorologists, were picking apart the script, and I understood it, and I loved it. So, eventually it led me to this position.
Well, when you talk about storm chasing, there can be some close calls. Did you guys have any?
With hail, large hail, one of our guys, Simon Brewer, said, the goal is not to get so close that you get hit, because then it's your last storm chase. And he said, I love doing this so much. So, but I'd say by season 4, I was like, let's get closer, let's get closer. Just, it draws you in, but again, you get your car ruined. It's like, well, there went the season. So
or if you're
close enough.
If you're the meteorologist in Twister, it ends very badly.
Right.
For the evil meteorologist.
Right, exactly.
So doing that, how did that prepare you for what you're doing now as the executive editor of the Climate Unit?
Yeah, well, so it gave me my background in weather, and it allowed me to be able to translate, technical weather speak into production, and into how to put it on television, like what you do. And this weather unit sort of formed into a climate unit several years ago. And that was because, we had to start reporting more on climate change. Climate change obviously has been happening for many, many years. And at NBC News, we decided to make a commitment to it, and it was important. So we decided, to do both weather coverage and then expand it, as you know, into climate coverage. And so I would love to hear from you. I know this is, our conversation, but about the climate coverage that, we've done together, and how sort of you've gone from, weather and integrating it, into your forecast.
Well, I think it's a natural evolution, obviously, that you started to see these changes happening, in the last 20 years, where you would look at this and say, something's going on here. But I think the danger has been, from the very beginning, I think the big problem was it was given the wrong name. Everybody said, oh, it's global warming. Well, it didn't, that only took in part of the issue, because we've seen extreme weather events that aren't just warmer temperatures, even though we are seeing that, but it's also causing other issues. So when people say, well, how come you're getting all these bad snowstorms if it's global warming? You hear some of these folks on the floor of Congress, questioning it. So the trick is to not be sensationalistic, but to be able, when we can, and that's where our climate unit comes in, with the research and our meteorologists who have this great background, of being able to connect the dots when we can, and not be, everything is climate change. Not everything is climate change, but, we're seeing more and more that is in fact happening.
And to your point with global warming, I remember, interviewing maybe somebody from NOAA, and they said it's climate change because every aspect of our climate is changing.
Right, exactly. So when people say to you, oh, well, do you really believe in this? What answers do you give them?
It's like, believe in it. It's like, do you believe in science? That's been the discussion the last several years, but the numbers don't lie, and when people ask, well, how do you present this? And it's like, Al's job, my job, is to just lay out the data. There is no discussion about it. The science doesn't lie. We interview experts. The experts give their expert data, not expert opinion. There are no opinions in this. You know, I mean, there's no more. You have to give the other side. There's not another side. You know, it is happening.
And we have to go where the story takes us. Tell some of the folks watching where we have gone and what we have covered.
2019 was some year for us, right? Like we were really picking up speed, which we've now returned to here in 2021. But you and I, in April 2019, went to Ukjavik, say it with me, Alaska, the northernmost city in the United States.
The funny thing is, besides everything else Erin had to do, she had to make sure I pronounce it correctly, because I probably pronounced it, I don't know, 13 different ways.
Yeah.
In a given live shot.
We have been all around this great area, 95,000 square miles, with 5 people, and I want them to come over here. Erin, come on over here. Aaron Sasson, our camera guy. Bobby, come over here, our audio guy. Erin McGarry, our producer. Kate Cropper, come on over very quickly. These are the folks who put, and Nate Congleton. Nate is our photographer. These are the folks who did this by just 5 people, and that to support me, that's kind of scary.
Ukjavik was our favorite.
Yeah.
So when you got it that morning, it was like, record it. Yeah. But as you know, so the west coast and northwest coast of Alaska, you know, is one of the first places in the United States that has climate refugees, you know, because the permafrost is melting and they're no longer able to live there. You know, I mean, their land is falling into the ocean, or, you know, we saw those pilings that their homes are on, and they're sinking, and they're constantly having to level them. And they're cellars, right? They dig deep into the ground in the permafrost, where they store all the meat from the seal meat, you know, the whale meat that
all
they
their hunting
that they catch for the year, and, you know, that they feed the whole community with. And those are melting. And we saw it, you know, there in person, puddles in the bottom of it. So their whole life is changing. And we got to travel up there. And then in August 2019, we went to Greenland, and we flew with NASA on OMG, right? And Operation Melting Glaciers? Yeah, Operation Melting Glaciers. And yeah, they were flying around the coast of Greenland, which they were able to do this year, and continually document how those glaciers are retreating.
Plus, we got to go out, you know, with some NYU researchers who were, you know, putting buoys out and getting a firsthand look at what was happening and the discoveries they were making, how the warm waters were undercutting the glaciers at an alarming rate.
Yeah, they found tropical waters, tropical temperature waters up in the Arctic for the first time in 2019.
It would seem to me now, as our climate unit, and we have a number of units at NBC News. We got our business unit, our medical unit. And what I think is kind of interesting is that climate is touching all these other units and parts of NBC News as well.
You know, with coronavirus. So when we were, you know, trying to get some stories on the air last year in 2020, you know, the first thing was, oh my gosh, the air quality was cleaning up, you know, immediately. And it showed what an impact humans do indeed have on the environment. And that if we all do come together, certainly not, you know, in that way, you know, with the tragedy, that things can change and things can change rapidly. So that first was like, okay, if you didn't believe that humans had an impact, you know, yes, they do, but also, you know, folks who are impacted by asthma, you know, because they're living by coal plants or through wildfire smoke, they're more impacted by, of course, respiratory disease, you know, which is coronavirus. So we're seeing, you know, through health. And so, yeah, and politics, right?
Yes.
I mean, it had a great impact on that. So, right, it touches everything.
And racial injustice. We've noticed, you know, communities of color are more greatly impacted by climate change. You know, that folks who live along the coast or in poor neighborhoods, things like that, that it's having that impact. And I think also, looking at this current administration, where we just came back from interviewing the new EPA administrator.
Yeah, Michael Regan.
And how there's a top-down approach to climate throughout every part of this government. So it would seem to me that our climate unit is probably not only going to be here to stay, but may actually be expanded.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and we are looking to expand it because we need folks, digging in on stories all the time. This isn't just reporting now on the melting glaciers. Like, that's where it starts. And now, and this is where young journalism students and folks who are just getting out there need to know their communities, and this is something that we're working on. But in local, know what's happening, in your community, next door. Do you have a coal-fired, plant, or do you have a lot of flooding, or just has there been an air quality issue for years, and have doctors and hospitals maybe noticed it and it just hasn't been talked about, so just kind of know what's going on locally.
It would seem to me that, look, I've got kids who are in their 20s and early 30s and even a late teen, that these young people coming out of journalism school, that they see this as an imperative, that they've got to talk about this. When you're talking to young folks, do you notice that they are much more engaged in this issue? Yeah.
So I just actually had a phone call with a Columbia journalism student who is a senior, and she already had volunteered, with all these different activism agencies. Had done a lot of on-the-ground reporting. So she already had done all these things in her years, because she learned about it early, and she was involved early where, with me, I'm in my mid-40s, and so we didn't even start talking about it till several years ago. And I remember when we were booking, stories, probably 2015, 2016, I said, we get to report on climate change, so, can we talk to you guys? Because we get to put it on the air, because nobody was putting it on the air.
For reporters thinking about covering climate, what are your takeaways for them?
Yeah, so they need to know the science. They need to know weather. You need to know, as we've talked about earlier, attribution. So climate is not causing weather, but it can be supercharging it. With hurricanes right now, they're not, they don't think that, scientists don't think it's causing more hurricanes, but it's fueling them, causing more rainfall, causing them to rapidly intensify, maybe go from a Cat 1 to a Cat 4 within 24 hours. I mean, that's, crazy for people trying to prepare, along the coast. So just knowing weather and how climate change, interacts with that. And then, again, knowing who's involved in your communities, knowing, what the policies are. No climate policy. That's something that we've really gotten involved in the last just few years here, whether things were being rolled back, or things are now getting enacted. So like the government, it's a whole of government approach. I think this is sort of, a whole of journalism in that you need to know, weather, science, and then your local community.
And that it just doesn't affect, you think about sea level rise. Well, that affects coastlines and things like that. But what about insurance costs?
Yes.
Or other, that there's an economic toll, there's a medical toll, that they have to look at a bigger picture than just, the weather may be changing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, economics are a huge part of it. And that's why you've seen big business now demand, that emissions get cut more. Well, why? Because they've seen that it's having an impact on their business, which is quite telling.
And that consumers are actually demanding action from companies that they may interact with.
Yeah, and I think you definitely see that from the younger crowd, and those are the folks who soon will be spending, a lot more money.
That's right, and replacing us.
Yeah.
Erin, thank you so much. I really appreciate everything you do. I know I certainly do.
I do too, yeah.
And we hope you have learned something today about our climate coverage and brought some great insight how folks can find a career space that works for them in the news business. Check out NBCUacademy.com to see more about how we cover the news, and we'll see you soon.